Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my AM reading video for Friday, August 21st, 2026. Going up on a Saturday, but actually filmed on a Friday for the first time in a while, which was always my plan, but I tend to get a bit lazy with things or a bit off schedule, but this time I was much more adamant about staying on schedule because tomorrow around this time I will be on my way or to the National Book Festival. So very excited. Priorities. And I even, that helped me keep more on schedule with my reading overall this week. So I have things to share with you. As always with these AM reading videos, I'm starting by reviewing a short story from a literary magazine, or in this case I'm reading from an anthology. This is Frankly Feminist, which includes short stories that were published in the Jewish feminist magazine, Jewish women's magazine, Lilith. Anyway, so the story I read this week is called Glass by Diana Spechler. It is the story of a bride, Shayna, getting ready for her wedding, but it is interdispersed with the fact that she has some cold feet, in large part because during the long engagement, while working at an aquarium, I believe, she embarked on a new relationship with a new fella. So she has some reservations about this marriage, which by the end of it really does seem to be wrapped up in the fact that it was arranged by her parents and her groom Isaac and her, they're both Jewish, whereas Vic, the other guy, is not. Anyway, this was a really short story that kind of seamlessly, it was kind of a stream of consciousness almost, although more with imagery, physical imagery, but it would go back and forth between her remembrances of time she snuck away with Vic, and then it would like interdisperse with her getting ready for the marriage and the actual marriage happening. And so we could get her sense of anxiety and unease about, this step that she's taking. I guess to a certain extent, I might have appreciated more insight into both relationships with both men, but that might take away from the sort of the visceral feel of this, quick snapshot into this unease. Next, the novel I finished this week is This Is Not About Us by Allegra Goodman. This was one of my anticipated 2026 releases, and Allegra Goodman is one of my favorite authors, and I liked this one pretty well. It's not one of my faves of hers, but I did appreciate it. So anyway, this is actually interconnected short stories, predominantly having to do with the Rubinstein family. And I guess the loose order is that it starts with the death of one of the matriarchs, or technically the three matriarchs, the first generation of survivors. This is, I think, is loosely modern day, but we don't actually get into it in a whole lot of detail. But we have these three sisters who are in their late 70s and early 80s, and it's actually the youngest one who is on her deathbed first. And the first story is about that and about her holding on even though she's in hospice care, and her family anxiously gathering around her, wondering, what the timetable is and how to approach death. And it culminates in the fact that Jean's two sisters, her two older sisters, Helen and Sylvia, kind of, get into a territorial sort of war about how to handle, well, not only the proceedings, but also the funeral, and things really culminate when, they're debating how to handle, food for the funeral and if it should be catering. And Sylvia is well known for her apple cakes and just can't resist, bringing an apple cake with her to the funeral, even though everybody had decided, or at least her older sister Helen had certainly decided that, that just wouldn't be par for the course. And this is the thing that actually drives a wedge between the two sisters for the rest of the storyline. So the rest of the stories, I think, take place maybe in somewhat chronological order for the next 2 years. And so the final story is actually about Sylvia's son having a child, like a baby, and Helen not being a part of that, but Sylvia for the last several stories really regretted that Helen has completely cut her off. And in that final story, Helen still won't talk to Sylvia, but she's semi-involved. One of her daughters comes to the bris for the child, the circumcision, and also, she does give a gift to the child. And so anyway, I think, the thing with short stories is, they can go up and down. I do think that by and large, the focusing on the Rubinsteins really helped give it a collective feel, and in fact the most jarring story, I don't know why Goodman decided to put it in exactly, but she has a story that's based on the dog walker for one of the characters, and the story isn't even about the character's dog, and I'm thinking, it doesn't necessarily fit the rest of this template, but what can I do? It's in the story. It's in the book. Otherwise, we're just following the younger generations. We got a couple of other younger generations in here, and people are dealing with their jobs changing, and their place in society changing. Like one of Sylvia's sons loses his job in publishing because publishing is moving more toward a multimedia angle, and he's more old school about being a book writer and book editor. And meanwhile, one of Jean's granddaughters is bequeathed Jean's violin, and she's this sort of unconventional waifish type of character who, despite all concerns from other people around her, is not doing the conventional college and job thing, but she's sort of traveling the country with her boyfriend, and they are playing music, and so in a way this is sort of the aesthetic I think that Jean liked the most, and she had a lot less in common with her sort of dundering athletic grandsons from her other child. So I don't know, I mean, which, in a way I wish those two boys Goodman would have given more perspective to, because there's something that just remains very sort of droll and one-dimensional about them. But anyway, we follow Helen's two daughters, neither of whom have grandchildren, or have children, which is another point of contention, that Helen, of all the sisters, doesn't have grandchildren, but her two daughters are in their 50s. One is married to a woman, and they decided not to have children, and the other, ultimately, in one of these stories, does end up in a relationship, but there's a lot of waters to sort of navigate with entering into a relationship with a divorced man in his 50s who had a previous family. So I think Goodman is known sort of for being kind of Austen-esque. So she has this sort of witty commentary on social mores of the day that comes out a lot in these stories about how people navigate their lives. And it is a Jewish family, so I do appreciate, we're following various Jewish holidays and various Jewish beliefs that crop up in these stories. It's, they're basically progressive Jews that, do have some religiosity, but, it's not always consistent either, especially since we're following multiple people with, multiple traditions ultimately, even if they are from the same family. I think one of my favorite moments comes from Redemption Song, which is about the holiday of Passover, and it's shortly after Jean's passing, within the year or two, and her descendants are all getting together to celebrate the two Seder nights, and a lot of it has to deal with the conflicts or tensions between her two sons, Dan and Steve, and then we get to other members of their family, and there's also commentary on how the Seder is run. Traditionally, people follow the Haggadah, which is the book that is the order of the Seder, just, to the letter. And you just sort of sit and chant for hours and hours. But some more modern interpretations, which the rest of the family has started doing, are to open the floor up to talk more freestyle about ideas of freedom and redemption, and maybe even to sing songs with the guitar, and to really enjoy yourself at Passover the way that perhaps, Dan and Steve didn't, growing up with their Holocaust survivor father, whose one joy was sort of sitting them down for this regimented and unenjoyable holiday. So now the brothers sort of chafe against, their wives and kids doing this, completely alien sort of ritual, and they retreat together to a back room. And this is how Goodman ends the story. And I just really appreciate her, just her own wordsmithery, and how she, identifies with the themes of the Passover holiday. Dan and Steve were sidelined, but they would make their comeback. They would return for dinner and more singing. They who had not suffered compared to other people. They who had grown up free. And actually, I think the weird thing is the first time I read this, I was thinking that they saw themselves as more encumbered, and the holiday was more of a burden versus the rest of their family who identified with Passover really more from the freedom and joy angle. But now, of course, I am reading it and thinking that it's them realizing that no matter, the strains of what they grew up with together and with their father, that they were actually still free in comparison to, the slaves of Egypt in the story. So yeah, I'm rambling on and on. I did like these stories, and I don't think it's as deep and contemplative as some of Goodman's other writing, but it does have its moments. And the final book I'll hold up is Buckeye by Patrick Ryan. This novel predominantly tracks two sets of couples, starting around the time of World War II. They're living in a small town in Ohio together. They're neighbors, and we're tracking the four members, and one of them goes off to war. One of them is a medium of sorts and hosts a growing number of neighbors in her parlor to try to make contact with the dead. The two other of them engage on an affair, and there's a child, and that's, I think, all I will be saying at this point of because I am reading this book for the BookTube Prize. So the BookTube Prize was started by Robert Sheard back in 2019 as a way for the literary bookdernet to come together to judge the best of literary fiction and nonfiction published in English in the US the year before. So this year in 2026, we are judging 2025 releases. We start in February with long lists of 48 books per division, and then we whittle it down through 4 rounds until we come up with winners and runners-up. So now we are in the final round, and I am judging the fiction division and the 6 books that remain on the ballot, which means I have to judge this book against 5 others and decide which are the strongest and then rank them in the order I believe they deserve to be in. But I can't talk to you about any of my thoughts about any of that until the round is officially over. So down below I will link to my preliminary thoughts video, and I will also link to more information on the BookTube Prize. So that about covers it for me now. I guess also additionally down below, I've reviewed everything that Allegra Goodman has written, at least in terms of her novels. There is, I think, another short story collection she did a long time ago, a couple decades ago, called The Family Markowitz, which is the most similar to the one I'm currently or just finished reading. So I'll link to that review down below in case you'd like more information on this type of writing. Otherwise, I do feel like I've rambled on in so many collections, particularly about the Goodman book. I'm hoping that I can go ahead and have an easy enough time of editing and getting this video up. I feel like I'm just short on time in general because I do have to get into work today as well, and then tomorrow is, National Book Festival, so do expect me back on this channel hopefully in the next couple of days with my coverage of that event. I have my panels that I've lined up, and I'm hoping to get a book signed as well, so it'll be a really fun time. I hope all of you have enjoyed your reading this week and have something enjoyable to look forward to this weekend as well. And thanks so much for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time.